On Capitol Hill behind us in Congress to Congresswoman Madeleine Dean from Pennsylvania, who was there in the chamber while the president was giving his State of the Union address. Several of your colleagues, Congresswoman, left during the address while the president was speaking. One came out and tweeted, "I can't listen to this anymore because it's so much lies." Is that appropriate for members to leave when the president is speaking?
I won't speak about whether or not it's appropriate. I think this is a free country, and we have the right of free communication. So they were simply reflecting their communication of what they were upset about in terms of this president's presentation tonight. It was a very disappointing speech. It was poorly crafted. I'm somebody who taught writing for 10 years, so there was no good rhetoric in it. But it was filled with the exact opposite of what this president has spent 3 years doing. He's been tearing down our relationships with minorities. He's been tearing down regulations that will protect our climate. He's been tearing down our educational system. And yet he talks about a failed government school. It is the government's responsibility to educate our children. He abandons the responsibilities of this government over and over again. It was hard to take. I felt it was my responsibility to be there and sit there and listen and know what it was he was putting forward. But sadly, it was filled with so much misinformation, so many lies that it was very tough to take.
Congresswoman, he did set out a number of areas where the Democrats and the Republicans need to work together on infrastructure, on healthcare, on prescription drugs. But you look at the sort of body language between the president tonight and the House Speaker Nancy Pelosi, and you wonder how they can work together on anything.
Well, I know that this speaker has attempted to work with this president over and over again, and I'm confident she will continue to. In caucus just last week, we talked about a $760 billion infrastructure package over 5 years that would do many of the things that the president said. I hope we can work on an infrastructure package for a 21st century economy. We owe that to our communities. We owe that to this country to be stewards of revenue and to make sure we rebuild our infrastructure, make sure we have rural broadband and make our communities safer, make mass transit more plentiful. I hope we can work together. It's up to the president to work. Think of some of the things he talked about. He wants to protect folks' health care. It is he who is in court from day one, tearing down the Affordable Care Act. He wants to reduce prescription drug pricing. Well, why doesn't he command the Senate to take up the bills that we have sent over to protect pre-existing condition? You saw us going H.R. 3. We passed that at the end of last year to reduce prescription drug pricing. This president mouths words and doesn't put any legislative heft behind it. But of course, this is a president who stands indicted for abuse of office and for obstruction of Congress. So a tiger does not change his stripes. What we saw tonight was yet again another act.
But Congresswoman, are Democrats going into this State of the Union, or rather just coming out of this State of the Union, somewhat on the back foot? Look, you've just had a fiasco of a first-in-the-nation caucus in Iowa. The president's approval ratings are doing well. The economy is doing well. And there he is in his address also reaching out to some of the voters that you need. It feels like there's a lot of wind in the president's sails tonight.
I didn't feel that at all. And in fact, you saw where I was seated. I was seated behind our row of impeachment managers, who I think did a masterful, sober job of putting before the Senate, the United States Senate, who took an oath of office to do impartial justice. They also spoke before the Chief Justice, who presided. And they showed the damning evidence of this president's impeachable behaviors. So I don't see wind in this man's sails. I see a man who stands impeached, is desperate for re-election, and has surrounded himself with people complicit to try to get him there. I pray tonight that those senators will sleep and say a prayer and wake up in the morning and do impartial justice. This president doesn't have wind in his sails. He has corruption in his administration.
Congresswoman Madeleine Dean, good of you to come and talk to us this evening. Thank you very much for your reaction to the State of the Union speech. Let's go back to Ron Christie, who is in the studio